The morning market was full of noise. Vendors were shouting prices, children were running between the stalls, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. It looked like a normal day, but in just a few moments, everything would change. Near the center of the market stood a small family. A respected general's wife and his young son had come to buy some food for their home. The general himself was away on duty, protecting the country. Most people in the town knew who the family was, but no one expected trouble to appear that morning. Then suddenly, a group of rough-looking men walked into the market. Their footsteps were slow but confident. They pushed people aside as they moved through the crowd. Some shopkeepers quietly stepped back, pretending to focus on their work. Others looked down, avoiding eye contact. These men had a reputation. They were known for bullying people and causing trouble wherever they went. One of them noticed the general's family standing near a fruit stall. A crooked smile appeared on his face. Well, look who we have here," he said loudly. The other men laughed. The general's wife tried to remain calm, holding her son's hand tightly. She didn't want to create a scene, but the men slowly surrounded them, blocking their way. People in the market noticed what was happening, but no one moved. Some were afraid. Others simply didn't want to get involved. The leader of the group stepped closer. "So the great general protects the whole country, but he can't even protect his own family today," he mocked. The men burst into laughter again. The young boy looked around, hoping someone would help. His eyes searched the crowd, but all he saw were people turning away. Fear began to grow inside him. His mother knelt slightly and whispered to him, "Stay calm." But the bullies weren't finished. They continued to taunt the family, speaking louder so everyone in the market could hear them. Their voices carried through the air, turning the once lively marketplace into an uncomfortable silence. Then one of the men suddenly grabbed an apple from the fruit stall and tossed it in the air. "Maybe the general should come save you," he said sarcastically. More laughter followed. The tension in the air grew heavier with every second. Yet something unusual was happening nearby. At a small wooden table not far from the scene, a quiet man sat calmly eating his meal with chopsticks. He had been there the entire time. He hadn't said a single word. He hadn't even looked up when the bullies first arrived. But now his eyes slowly lifted. From across the market, he observed everything carefully. His expression remained calm, almost too calm. The bullies were so busy mocking the family that they didn't notice him watching. Most people in the market saw only a simple man sitting quietly. Someone ordinary, someone unimportant. But if they had looked closer, they might have noticed something different about him. The way he sat, the focus in his eyes, the quiet confidence in his posture. It was the kind of presence that didn't need to make noise to be powerful. Meanwhile, the bullies continued their cruel game, believing no one would challenge them. They thought the market belonged to them. They thought fear would keep everyone silent. But they had no idea that someone extraordinary was sitting only a few steps away. And in just a few moments, the entire market would witness something they would never forget. Because the quiet stranger at that table was Bruce Lee, and he had just decided to stand up. The marketplace remained frozen in silence. The bullies were still laughing, enjoying the attention they were getting from the frightened crowd. To them, this was just another moment of control, another display of power over people who were too afraid to resist. The leader leaned closer to the general's wife. "Where's your brave husband now?" he mocked. "I thought generals were supposed to protect their families." His men laughed loudly again, feeding off his cruelty. The young boy clenched his fists. He wanted to say something. He wanted to defend his mother. But the fear inside him held his words back. Around them, the crowd pretended not to see. Some shoppers slowly moved away. Others stayed still, hoping the situation would end quickly. No one wanted to attract the attention of the bullies. But across the market, the quiet stranger at the small wooden table had finally placed his chopsticks down. Bruce Lee had been watching everything. Every insult, every laugh, every moment of fear in the boy's eyes. He took a slow breath and stood up calmly. There was no anger on his face, no dramatic movement, just quiet determination. The chair behind him slid slightly as he stepped away from the table. The sound was small, but somehow it caught the attention of a few nearby people. Some heads slowly turned. They saw the man walking toward the center of the market. At first, no one thought much of it. To them, he looked like an ordinary traveler, simple clothes, calm posture, nothing unusual. But the way he walked was different. Each step was relaxed, yet purposeful. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't hesitating either. Meanwhile, the bullies continued their taunting. One of them tossed another piece of fruit into the air, catching it carelessly. Maybe the general sent his little boy to fight us instead, he joked. More laughter echoed through the market. The boy lowered his head in embarrassment. But then something unexpected happened. A calm voice spoke from behind the group. That's enough. The words weren't loud. They weren't shouted. Yet somehow they cut through the air sharper than any yell. The laughter stopped. Slowly, the bullies turned around. Standing a few steps away was the quiet stranger. Bruce Lee. He looked at them calmly, his eyes steady and focused. The leader of the group raised an eyebrow. And who are you supposed to be? He asked with a mocking grin. Bruce Lee didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced briefly at the frightened family, making sure they were safe. Then his gaze returned to the men standing before him. You've said enough, he replied calmly. The bullies looked at each other before bursting into laughter again. This time, their laughter was even louder. Look at this guy, one of them said. Another hero from the crowd. The leader stepped forward, sizing Bruce Lee up. You should walk away, he warned. This doesn't concern you. Bruce Lee remained perfectly still. I think it does, he said quietly. His calmness confused them. Most people who confronted them either shouted in anger or trembled with fear. But this man showed neither. He looked completely relaxed, as if the situation didn't bother him at all. The leader's smile slowly faded. Something about the stranger felt different, but pride wouldn't allow him to back down now. He stepped closer to Bruce Lee, trying to intimidate him. You must be very brave, he sneered, or very foolish. The crowd watched nervously. Some people whispered to each other. Others held their breath. No one knew who the stranger was, but they could feel the tension building. Bruce Lee's posture remained calm and balanced. His eyes never left the bullies. And although the men in front of him still believed they were in control, they had just made a mistake they would soon regret. Because the quiet man standing before them was not an ordinary stranger. And in the next few moments, the entire marketplace would finally understand exactly who they were dealing with. For a few seconds, the entire marketplace stood completely still. The tension in the air was so thick that even the sounds of the busy street seemed to disappear. Vendors stopped shouting their prices. Customers stopped moving between stalls. Everyone's attention was now focused on the strange moment unfolding in the center of the market. The bullies had surrounded the quiet stranger. Bruce Lee stood calmly in front of them, his posture relaxed, his breathing steady. He looked neither angry nor afraid. That calmness only irritated the leader of the group even more. Most people, when faced with a group like this, would panic. Some would shout, others would beg, and many would simply run away. But this man did none of those things. Instead, he stood there as if nothing about the situation worried him at all. The leader took another step closer. You still have time to walk away, he said, his voice slightly colder now. This isn't your problem. Bruce Lee looked directly into his eyes. When someone uses strength to frighten others, he said calmly, it becomes everyone's problem. A few people in the crowd exchanged surprised looks. No one usually spoke to these men like that. For a moment, the bullies seemed confused. Then one of them suddenly laughed again. Did you hear that? He said to the others. This guy thinks he's some kind of hero. The group chuckled, but their laughter sounded a little forced now. Something about the stranger's confidence made them uneasy. The leader folded his arms and studied Bruce Lee more carefully. You must think you're very skilled, he said. Bruce Lee didn't respond. Instead, he simply stood there, completely balanced and aware of everything around him. The leader noticed the man's posture. His stance looked natural, almost casual. Yet there was something precise about the way he stood, like someone who understood his body perfectly. Still, pride pushed the bully forward. You know, he continued, smirking, we've dealt with people like you before. He motioned to the men behind him. They always talk big at first. The others nodded and stepped closer, slowly forming a circle. In the crowd, whispers began spreading. Who is that man? Why is he standing up to them? Does he know how dangerous they are? Meanwhile, the young boy from the general's family watched the scene with wide eyes. For the first time since the trouble began, he felt something different. Hope. The stranger had stepped forward when no one else dared to. Even his mother looked surprised, though worry still filled her face. She knew the men they were dealing with. They were unpredictable. Across the circle, one of the bullies cracked his knuckles loudly. "Well," he said, "if you try to impress the crowd, it's not working." Another one stepped forward and pointed at Bruce Lee. "Last warning," he said. "Walk away." Bruce Lee slowly shook his head. "I'm not here to fight," he replied calmly. The bullies looked at each other, confused. "Then why are you here?" the leader asked. Bruce Lee's voice remained steady. "I'm here to remind you that respect matters." For a second, there was silence again. Then the group burst into laughter. "Respect," one of them repeated. "You think we care about respect?" The leader stepped closer, now only a few feet away. "You're standing in the wrong place if you're looking for respect," he said. Bruce Lee finally shifted his stance slightly. The movement was small, so small that most people in the crowd barely noticed. But the leader did, and suddenly he felt a strange feeling in his chest. Something about that tiny movement had changed the atmosphere. It was subtle, yet powerful. It was the movement of someone completely in control. The bully frowned slightly, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. "You're making a big mistake," he said. Bruce Lee looked around the circle of men. His expression remained calm. "If I walk away," he said quietly, "you'll just find someone else to bully tomorrow." The crowd grew even quieter. People were now watching with intense focus. They could sense that something important was about to happen. The leader clenched his jaw. He hated being challenged, especially in front of so many witnesses. "All right," he said slowly. "You want to stand here like a hero?" He gestured toward Bruce Lee. "Then let's see what you can actually do." Behind him, the other men smiled confidently again. They believed numbers were on their side. But what they didn't realize was that the calm stranger standing before them wasn't just confident. He was prepared, and the moment they decided to act, they would finally understand the truth. Because the quiet man they were mocking was about to reveal a level of control, speed, and discipline they had never seen before. And once that moment arrived, the entire marketplace would remember it forever. The circle around Bruce Lee slowly tightened. The bullies believed they had the advantage. There were several of them, and only one of him. In their minds, this situation was already decided. But Bruce Lee remained calm. His breathing was steady. His shoulders relaxed. His eyes quietly observed every movement around him. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was simply ready. The leader of the group stepped forward again, trying to appear confident in front of the crowd. "You had your chance to walk away," he said coldly. Bruce Lee didn't move. Instead, he spoke calmly. "It's never too late to stop doing the wrong thing." The words irritated the men even more. One of the bullies laughed loudly. "Listen to him," he said. "Now he thinks he's our teacher." Another man cracked his knuckles and took a step closer. "Enough talking," he muttered. The leader nodded slightly, signaling that he had heard enough. He stepped forward, raising his hand as if to shove Bruce Lee out of the way. The crowd gasped. Many people turned their heads, expecting the moment to explode into chaos. But something unexpected happened. Before the bully's hand even reached him, Bruce Lee shifted slightly to the side. The movement was incredibly smooth, so smooth that it almost looked effortless. The bully's push missed completely, throwing him slightly off balance. For a brief moment, confusion crossed the man's face. He hadn't expected that. Bruce Lee didn't strike him. He didn't retaliate. He simply stepped back into his calm stance. The leader frowned. "What was that?" one of the bullies asked. Bruce Lee answered quietly. "Control." The crowd murmured. People began whispering to each other again. The stranger wasn't acting like someone who was afraid. In fact, he seemed completely comfortable. That only made the bullies angrier. Another man stepped forward, trying to grab Bruce Lee by the shoulder. Again, Bruce Lee moved. A quick step, a gentle shift. The bully stumbled forward, unable to catch him. Gasps spread through the marketplace. The movements had been so fast that some people barely saw them. The leader's expression slowly changed. His confidence was starting to crack. "Stop playing games," he snapped. Bruce Lee looked at him calmly. "I'm not playing," he replied. For the first time, the bullies began to realize something strange. This man wasn't lucky. He wasn't guessing. Every movement he made was precise, balanced, intentional. The leader clenched his fists. "Who are you?" he demanded. Bruce Lee remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke quietly. "Just someone who believes strength should protect people, not frighten them." The words hung in the air. Around them, the crowd had grown larger. People from nearby streets had gathered to watch. They could sense something important was unfolding. Meanwhile, the general's young son watched with amazement. The stranger who had stepped forward earlier now seemed completely in control of the situation. Even without raising his voice, even without attacking, the bullies, however, were becoming impatient. Their pride was wounded. They had tried to intimidate him. They had tried to overpower him. Yet he had avoided every move with ease. The leader finally took a deep breath and looked at his men. "This guy thinks he's untouchable," he said. His voice grew louder. "Let's see if he's still this calm when we stop holding back." The men around Bruce Lee slowly stepped closer again. This time their smiles were gone. The tension in the marketplace rose sharply. Everyone could feel it. Something bigger was about to happen. But Bruce Lee still stood there calmly. His posture relaxed, his focus sharp. And although the bullies believed they were about to teach the stranger a lesson, they were actually moments away from learning one themselves. Because the calm man standing before them hadn't even begun to reveal his true ability yet. The tension in the marketplace had reached its peak. People stood shoulder to shoulder now, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. No one spoke loudly anymore. Even the vendors had stopped calling out their prices. Everyone could feel that something important was about to happen. The bullies had completely surrounded Bruce Lee. Their earlier laughter had faded. In its place was frustration and a growing determination to prove their dominance. The leader looked at the stranger one more time. "You've embarrassed us long enough," he said sharply. Bruce Lee remained calm. His posture was relaxed, but his attention was sharp. His eyes quietly moved from one man to another, carefully observing their movements. Years of discipline had trained him to stay focused in moments like this. He wasn't thinking about anger. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was simply aware. The leader raised his hand slightly, signaling to the others. "Move," he ordered. Two of the men stepped forward at the same time, attempting to grab Bruce Lee and overpower him with their numbers. But what happened next stunned everyone watching. Bruce Lee moved with incredible speed. Not wild movements. Not chaotic reactions. Every step was controlled. Every motion precise. As one man lunged forward, Bruce Lee calmly shifted his body to the side. The attacker's momentum carried him past his target, forcing him to stumble forward. At the same time, Bruce Lee gently redirected the second man's movement with a quick motion of his arm. It looked almost effortless. Within seconds, both men had lost their balance. Gasps spread through the crowd. "What just happened?" someone whispered. The bullies themselves looked shocked. They had expected resistance. They had expected fear. Instead, they were facing something completely different. The leader narrowed his eyes. "Don't underestimate him," he warned his men. Bruce Lee stepped back into his calm stance. He still hadn't thrown a strike. He still hadn't raised his voice. Yet somehow, he had already taken control of the entire situation. One of the bullies shook his head angrily. "You think you're clever?" he growled. He rushed forward again, trying to grab Bruce Lee's arm. Once again, Bruce Lee reacted with perfect timing. He turned slightly, guiding the man's movement away from him. The attacker stumbled to the side, nearly colliding with one of his own partners. More murmurs spread through the crowd. People were beginning to understand what they were witnessing. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. The stranger clearly possessed an extraordinary level of skill and awareness. Even the leader was starting to realize it. He studied Bruce Lee carefully. The calm posture, the relaxed breathing, the precise movements. Suddenly, a thought crossed his mind. "Wait," he muttered quietly. One of the men beside him spoke up. "What's wrong?" The leader stared at the stranger's face. Something about it seemed familiar. But before he could fully process the thought, another frustrated bully rushed forward. This time Bruce Lee responded slightly differently. Instead of only avoiding the attack, he quickly redirected the man's arm and gently pushed him off balance. The movement was fast but controlled. The attacker stumbled backward several steps before catching himself. The crowd gasped again. Now it was obvious. This quiet stranger wasn't just defending himself. He was controlling the entire flow of the confrontation, and he was doing it without harming anyone. The leader's expression slowly changed. Confusion turned into realization. He took a careful step back. "Hold on," he said to his men. They looked at him, surprised. "What?" one of them asked. The leader pointed at the stranger. "Look at him closely," he said. The men stared again. The calm eyes, the focused posture, the quiet confidence. And suddenly, recognition began to spread across their faces. One of them whispered in disbelief, "Wait, that can't be." Another man's eyes widened. "I've seen him before." The leader swallowed nervously. A realization had finally hit him. The man standing before them wasn't just some brave stranger from the crowd. He wasn't an ordinary traveler. He wasn't someone they could intimidate. He was someone the entire world respected. Someone known for discipline, speed, and unmatched control. The leader slowly stepped back again. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You idiots," he said to his men. "Do you even know who that is?" The bullies looked at each other nervously. The marketplace had fallen completely silent. And in that powerful moment of realization, the truth finally became impossible to ignore. The quiet man they had been mocking was none other than Bruce Lee. The marketplace seemed to hold its breath. The moment of realization hit the bullies like a sudden wave. Their eyes widened as they fully understood who they were facing. Bruce Lee, the very man whose name alone inspired awe and fear, was standing calmly in front of them. And now, the laughter, the arrogance, and the smug confidence that had carried them this far began to crumble. The leader swallowed hard. For a moment, he seemed paralyzed, unsure whether to attack or flee. His men glanced at each other, uncertainty written all over their faces. They had mocked strangers before. They had pushed around families before. But never anyone like this. Bruce Lee's posture remained relaxed, yet every muscle was ready. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to move violently. His presence alone radiated a silent power that demanded respect. The air around him felt different, charged, tense, as if the very space recognized his mastery. You're Bruce Lee," one of the bullies stammered, disbelief in his voice. "Yes," Bruce replied calmly, his eyes scanning the group, reading each movement and intention like an open book. "And your strength is being misused." The leader's pride fought against the shock. We never intended," he started, but the words faltered. Bruce Lee shook his head slightly. "Intention is meaningless when your actions harm others. You've chosen the path of fear, and now you will face the consequences of your own arrogance." The words were soft but precise. Each syllable carried weight. The bullies could feel them like a physical force pressing on their consciousness. Some of them shifted uneasily, instinctively taking a step back. Bruce Lee moved, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but in that fraction of a second, the air around him seemed to tighten. His movements were a dance of perfect timing and control. Each motion anticipated the smallest threat before it could even begin. Two bullies tried to approach him at once, thinking sheer numbers would intimidate him. But Bruce was already there, intercepting each move with effortless precision. He didn't strike to harm. He redirected, deflected, and controlled. Within moments, both men were off balance, struggling to regain their footing. The crowd gasped, whispering to each other. Some had never seen anything like it. They could see clearly now, this wasn't a fight in the traditional sense. Bruce Lee wasn't just defending himself. He was dominating the situation with a combination of skill, awareness, and calm control that seemed almost supernatural. The leader froze, his confidence evaporating with every passing second. Sweat formed on his brow. His men's faces reflected growing panic. They had mocked and bullied without fear until now. Bruce Lee's gaze softened for a brief moment as he looked at the general's family, who were still standing a few feet away, trembling but unharmed. "Courage is not about fearlessness," he said quietly, but about standing up when fear surrounds you. Today, you chose to stand. Even as he spoke, the bullies realized they had already lost, not through brute force, but through the revelation of true mastery. Bruce's every movement, every glance, every controlled breath communicated a simple truth. Strength without discipline is meaningless, and arrogance without respect leads only to defeat. The leader finally took a step back, lowering his head slightly. His men mirrored him, hesitation replacing the boldness that had carried them to the market. For the first time, they were unsure of their own power. The marketplace remained silent, yet alive with tension. People were witnessing something extraordinary, a man whose skill and presence were more powerful than fear itself. They could feel the weight of mastery in the air, a lesson delivered silently, yet undeniably. Bruce Lee's eyes never left the group of bullies. He didn't need a strike. He didn't need to raise his voice. His calm, controlled, and deliberate presence was enough. It was proof that true power isn't in violence or intimidation. It's in discipline, awareness, and respect. And in that moment, the general's family, the crowd, and even the bullies themselves understood something important. Bruce Lee's true power was not in his fists. It was in the control of his mind, his body, and his will. The realization had sunk in. The bullies had been defeated, not through fear, not through anger, but through the quiet, unstoppable mastery of a legend. The marketplace was silent, yet every heartbeat seemed louder than the chatter that had filled it moments before. People froze in their places, their eyes locked on the unfolding scene. Even the air felt thick with tension, charged by the knowledge that something extraordinary was about to happen. The bullies, once filled with arrogance and bravado, were now pale-faced and uneasy. Their earlier confidence had dissolved into confusion and fear. They had underestimated this man, and now they realized their mistake. The name Bruce Lee carried weight, but seeing him in person, standing calmly, every movement controlled and deliberate, made that weight tangible, almost unbearable. The leader stepped forward, shaking with a mixture of pride and terror. He tried to sound commanding, but his voice quivered. We can't just back down. Are you going to fight us or not? Bruce Lee's gaze remained calm. He did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. Instead, he simply looked at the group, letting his presence communicate what words never could: mastery, control, and inevitability. You already know the answer, he said quietly. This ends without needless violence. But your choices have consequences. The crowd watched, holding their breath. Even the general's wife and son, trembling a few feet away, felt a surge of hope. They had witnessed fear, helplessness, and ridicule. But now, there was justice in its purest form, the quiet, undeniable authority of someone who understood the difference between strength and abuse. The leader snapped, trying to assert control one last time. Enough talking, he shouted. Show us what you've got. In an instant, Bruce Lee moved, not with anger, but with fluid precision. One by one, the bullies lunged toward him, thinking sheer numbers would intimidate him. But each motion was met with a combination of anticipation, deflection, and timing so perfect it seemed almost supernatural. A shove, a step to the side, a gentle redirection. Each movement sent the bullies stumbling off balance, unable to regain control. Some grabbed at him in frustration, only to be guided away by his effortless motions. Not one of them could land a blow. Not one could approach without being subtly, yet decisively controlled. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People could barely process what they were seeing. This was not chaos. It was art. Every motion, every glance, every subtle shift in Bruce Lee's posture communicated absolute dominance without cruelty. The bullies' confidence melted as quickly as the fear they had inspired in others. Then Bruce Lee stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. You came here to intimidate the weak. Today, the weak stood, and you learned your lesson without a single strike. The leader's knees weakened. His bravado shattered. He had expected to control the scene with force, but force alone could not stand against awareness, discipline, and skill. His men looked at him, fear mirrored in their eyes. They knew the situation was lost. Bruce Lee turned his gaze to the general's family. The young boy's eyes met his, and Bruce offered a slight nod, a gesture of reassurance. Courage, he seemed to say silently, is rewarded. The leader finally stepped back, his voice barely audible. We are leaving. No one attacks us again. The other men followed, stumbling slightly, embarrassed and terrified. They had come to instill fear, but instead they had learned respect. Not the respect forced by threats, but the respect inspired by mastery and calm authority. The marketplace remained still for a moment after they fled. People slowly began to exhale, the tension in their shoulders easing. Whispers of awe spread. Did you see that? That was incredible. It's Bruce Lee. The general's wife approached her son, holding him close. Relief washed over her face. The young boy looked up, still wide-eyed, and whispered, "He protected us without even hurting anyone." Bruce Lee's eyes scanned the crowd one last time. Calm, focused, unshaken. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a lesson far stronger than any blow could deliver. True power is not in fear or intimidation. True power is in self-discipline, awareness, and the ability to act with precision when it matters most. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not in applause, but in silent admiration. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a man who could conquer violence without succumbing to it. And for the general's family, and for everyone who had doubted courage in the face of fear, one truth now shone brighter than ever. The quiet, disciplined, unstoppable force of Bruce Lee could not be challenged. It could only be respected. In that moment, the marketplace was no longer a place of fear. It had become a testament to mastery, a living example of courage, discipline, and the true meaning of power. And everyone who had witnessed it knew that this was a story they would never forget.